Okay, let's get going. Welcome to the National Alopecia Areata Foundation's webinar, Turning Alopecia Areata Advocacy into Action. Joining us today are Dr. Kristen Lasico, Allison Lee, Lindsay Sullivan, and Julie Yu. And I'm Lisa Anderson, Senior Director of Research for NAF. Before we start the webinar, I want to cover a few housekeeping details. We've disabled chat for this webinar, but please post any questions that you have for our speakers in the Q&A section. This webinar is being recorded, and all registrants will receive a link to the recording via email a few days after the program. And don't forget to share your feedback with us. At the conclusion of the webinar, a survey will pop up in your browser window. Please complete the survey there. This webinar is part of NAF's You Are Not Alone Education and Empowerment webinar series. With today's webinar, we're entering our second year of the series. Thanks for being here, for participating in the Q&A, and for sharing your feedback with us. We're looking forward to new topics and presenters for the program in the coming months. NAF gratefully acknowledges the support provided for this webinar series by our partners Eli Lilly and Company and Sun Pharma. I want to start today's program by telling you a bit about NAF and our mission. The National Alopecia Areata Foundation is the leading advocacy organization for alopecia areata. NAF's mission is to support research to find a cure or acceptable treatment for alopecia areata, support those with the disease, and educate the public about alopecia areata. NAF's vision is an empowered community with a choice to embrace or live free of alopecia areata. To learn more about NAF's support resources and research and advocacy activities, or to join us as an advocate or supporter, please visit our website at naf.org. Just a reminder that NAF's annual conference is coming up soon. The conference will take place Friday, June 30th through Sunday, July 2nd in Denver, Colorado. This is the largest and most complete gathering of the alopecia areata community. Come meet other resilient alopecia areata patients and their families and learn more from experts, including researchers, clinicians, medical professionals, as well as some of the folks on our panel today. We hope to see you in Denver. So that brings us to today's webinar, Turning Alopecia Areata Advocacy into Action. We're very pleased to have with us some members of the alopecia areata community who have taken their advocacy to the next level. These are folks who have participated with NAF as legislative advocates, and they are all co-founders of the Alopecia Justice League. I'm going to introduce them briefly here, and then I'll let them tell you more about themselves. With us today, we have Dr. Kristen Lasico, dermatologist at NYU Langone Health. Dr. Lasico specializes in alopecia areata. She's also associate professor at the NYU School of Medicine. Allison Lee is a high school junior living in New York City. She has had alopecia universalis since the age of 5. And Lindsay Sullivan is the NAF support group leader for New York. She is also creator and host of Very Nearly Almost, her podcast about alopecia and her other secret superpowers. And finally, Julie Yu is a senior vice president and global head of mergers and acquisitions at Fanatics. All four are passionate advocates for alopecia areata awareness and empowerment and seeking legislative change. Thank you all for being here today. We're so happy to have you. Dr. Lasico, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And on behalf of all of us at AJL, and these are the 4 founding members that are on this webinar this evening, we really want to thank NAF and the entire community for having us tonight. Our advocacy and passion is really what's brought the 4 of us together. So I wanted to start by just briefly introducing myself and then giving the other 3 founding members of AJL a chance to introduce themselves. And then we'll open it up to a poll question to help launch what our reason for advocacy was that really drove our passion for starting AJL. And then we'll have a second poll question, and we'll wrap it up with talking more about how we can advocate for our community. So as Lisa said, my name is Dr. Kristen Losico. I'm an associate professor of dermatology in the Ronald O. Perlman Department of Dermatology at NYU Langone Health. And I really actually gravitated toward patients with alopecia areata early on in my residency at Pitt or UPMC in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And there, actually had the opportunity to focus my my continuity clinic as a resident physician, meaning I saw the same group of patients once a week. I had once a week where I had a continuity clinic where I really chose to focus it on alopecia patients when I was a senior resident. And that's really because I saw a group of people that really needed a voice and they needed somebody other than themselves to be their advocate. And that's really what drew me toward focusing my career and actually much of my research on alopecia specifically, including alopecia areata. And now I'm going to turn it to Lindsay Sullivan to talk about how we were introduced to each other and how we are advocating through change through AJL.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. I'm so thankful for this time with you all and to be with these lovely ladies. So I am 30 years old. I've had alopecia areata since age 2. This is it. This is what you get, folks. This is what we're dealing with. So I made a choice to just kind of let my hair do its thing when I was 17. And that choice really opened so many doors for me personally. And so I am someone that really loves to, obviously as a support group leader, meet people where they are. You know, there's no one way to handle alopecia. It's a very niche thing that happens to a lot of people. So I really started attending NAF support groups in my early 20s because I have a great support system of friends, didn't really know anyone with alopecia. And so through that group, I met the lovely Dr. Kristen Losico, who is just such a great advocate, wealth of information about all things treatment and just support, and even just like the medical side of alopecia. She's wonderful. And so my participation with this group has obviously grown. I basically got to a place where I was like, I want to meet people where they are, but I also want people to step into themselves, whether that's not covering up, whether that's finding the best doctor for the best treatment, whether that's getting the perfect wig. And so I became a support group leader in 2017. And during the pandemic, a really great thing happened. And that was the lovely Gary Sherwood, who's the communications director at NAF, was like, do you want to be a legislative liaison? And I was like, that sounds very fancy. And so through that opportunity, I spoke with the girl genius, Allison Lee, and her wonderful mother, Julie Yu, who had actually attended some of my support group meetings. And we basically put together what I sort of said this jokingly on a call one night where I was like, yo, we're like the Alopecia Justice League. Like Kristen has like the medical brains. I've had it for a really long time. Allison's had it also since childhood. And Julie doesn't have alopecia, but she's a baller mother and supporter of someone with it. So I'm just so excited to be with these ladies today. And you guys are in for a real treat hearing from them as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Allison.
Hello, my name is Allison and I'm 17 years old. I live in New York City and I've had alopecia since I was 5 years old. And I had the pleasure of becoming familiar with NAF right before the pandemic when I attended my first support group meeting, which Lindsay was the leader of. And after attending that support group meeting, I knew immediately that I wanted to become more involved with NAF. And through that, I met Gary Sherwood, as Lindsay said, who is the director of communications at NAF. And that is how I became a legislative mentor. And after becoming a legislative mentor, I realized that advocacy was the avenue that allowed me to really express myself and embrace my alopecia. And that led me to co-found the Alopecia Justice League.
Thank you, Allison. Julie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Yu. Allison's my daughter. I also have another daughter who has alopecia. So alopecia has been a big part of our lives for the last 12 years, and met Lindsay and Dr. Losico through NAF support meeting. And that was a real game changer for us. For many years as a mother raising 2 kids with alopecia, it often felt I was alone. What was best for my children. And through that, we've been able to connect with the community, which I'm very thankful of.
Wonderful. So Dominique, we'd like to introduce our first poll question to help launch our next topic. Okay, so our first question is, please estimate the cost of a high quality wig. Is it $1 through $3.99, $400 to $7.99, $800 to $1,000, or more than $1,000. So take your best guess as to what the average cost of a high quality wig is in the United States. So we're going to obviously give you the answer to this, but just as important, we're going to talk about things that we focus on as advocates. Okay, so as Dominique is collating all of that data, okay, here we go. Very good. And so the majority of our respondents are correct. Indeed, 59% of you said that more than $1,000. And I think this is probably from personal experience as well. And so I'm going to close out this. So the answer is over $1,000. And Allison, can you talk a little bit about how we came to focus on advocacy for wigs and how they really should be a choice, because having alopecia areata isn't?
Yes, I would love to talk about that. I think that having a condition in which, there's very limited things that are within your control, being able to choose what to wear that will make you feel most comfortable is really paramount. It's the most important thing above all else. And that is why our legislative priority is advocating for greater accessibility for wigs, because while not everyone with alopecia, let's say their priority or their favorite headwear choice is a wig, we believe that everyone should still be empowered to have the choice without having to bear any financial burdens, because as we saw through that poll, wigs are incredibly costly and oftentimes not covered by insurance, which many people don't realize.
And so to just expand upon what Allison said, from a medical standpoint, there is literature published in peer-reviewed dermatology journals and medical journals showing that wigs actually have a significant impact on quality of life. However, unfortunately, as we all know from personal experience with ourselves or friends or family, that there is a lack of coverage, not just in the United States, but actually worldwide. And so this is really a problem that we're faced with trying to solve, and hence one of our focuses of AJL. Lindsay, can you talk a little bit about, what your personal choices are and how you help to advocate for people for their own personal choices?
Absolutely, Kristen. Thank you for saying that. Something I find a lot as a support group leader is so many of my support groups are dominated by people asking questions about wigs. I recommend so many Instagram followings of people that are really great at putting on wigs, finding great ones. That is something that's really top of mind for my attendees. So that, of course, is top of mind for me. I myself wore a wig for a car ride when I was 5, and it was really itchy. And, that was also the 90s. Wigs have certainly come a long way, but again, they are top dollar, very expensive. And so it's interesting. I've always had sort of a back and forth with wigs. They just feel very different for me. And obviously, you have to choose what feels best for you when you have alopecia, because so much, as you guys so artfully said and coined throughout the duration of our AJL, projects, is having a wig should be a choice because alopecia isn't. And so while I myself do not rock a wig, I know wonderful people that do, and I absolutely want, and that doesn't mean my mind won't change, right? I think the truest sign of love you can sometimes give yourself is a changed mind, right? Just because you're doing one thing, or I was pursuing treatment when I was younger, it's your journey to be on. And so something that I think about a lot is when I was asked to be a legislative liaison, policy can feel so far away, right? It can feel so much bigger than us, or there's these big, smart people making these decisions that are so far away, but actually those decisions affect our day-to-day life. Policy is personal. It has to be personal. And I feel like my work through the Alopecia Justice League has really brought that focus inward, where I'm like, oh, I can make a difference. And not just in, I'm not limited to being a support group leader in New York. It's we can make a difference for all of these people. So through these sort of tangible bills that we're really hoping to get passed in the House, in the Senate, we're really trying to make policy personal and affect the lives of people that could greatly benefit from wigs, because it's got to be a personal choice. Just because I wouldn't rock a wig doesn't mean y'all won't rock a wig.
Julie, can you tell us a little bit about how you help? You said, the kids have had, I mean, Allison is almost an adult now. But you said having children with alopecia areata and from a young age, how have you help them to navigate life with alopecia areata? And if you feel comfortable, what are some things that you struggled with as a parent helping your children to navigate that?
Yeah, our experience with Allison was so much different than it was with Maddie, my younger one. With Allison, we didn't know what the condition was for a long time because it started with very small, small patch of hair loss, and then it grew, but then the hair grew back. Now, as it got bigger and bigger, we did see a lot of doctors. Gosh, one year I just remember spending hours and hours at doctors' offices and even going to a wig shop and having a hard time finding a wig that fits Allison, let alone the cost was just so enormous. But I wanted her to have that choice. So we bought one and she wore it for a lot, for some time, but it was really through ups and downs of a lot of, emotional roller coaster, depending on the treatment, depending on the day, how Allison was treated at school, and, awareness for alopecia, even a couple years back, it was very, very low. I think that, recent incidents has increased the awareness of alopecia. So, so it has certainly helped. But the NAF meeting, as I mentioned, that was a real game changer, and finding and and connecting with others with that condition at that support group. Many people who were much older than Allison actually gave us a lot of confidence and comfort that we can navigate this together.
And I think that's a wonderful thing that's really come from Alopecia Justice League. Even though we're the 4 founding members, the community has grown significantly. And I think that's in large part to Allison, who runs our social media account. That's what warms my heart as somebody, who helps to care for people with alopecia areata, is seeing the younger generation connect with one another and also helping to advocate for change, not just for themselves, but for the kids that are younger than them. Allison, can you talk a little bit about that Alopecia Justice League Pen Pal program?
Yes, I would love to. So one initiative that the Alopecia Justice League has been working on for a couple of months is an Alopecia Pen Pal program. And the Alopecia Pen Pal program is open to all members of the alopecia community. And the program's main goal was to provide mentorship from older alopecia teenage mentors to younger children with alopecia. And we made this our main priority because I think a common occurrence that many people who have alopecia growing up, they don't know anyone with alopecia. They can count on one hand the number of people with alopecia that they've met. And so we wanted to create this mentorship program. That way we could, create a space for younger children with alopecia to have a friend and be able to talk to someone who has had similar experiences. We acknowledge that everyone's alopecia experience is different, but even just having one person to connect with at the end of a hard day is really life-changing.
That's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that, Allison. And I think, the idea for the AJL Pen Pal program, again, just came from our impromptu meetings with each other, just catching up, saying, how is everything going, right? And we said, how else can we promote change and connect with people in the community? And I think that's really how this idea was born, right? In us thinking about how we can further connect to the community and help to advocate and make people feel not so alone. And like your mom said too, when you were little, it was difficult because they didn't know, technically, what was going on. A lot of anxiety is surrounded a lot around not knowing, right? Lack of knowing what's going on, and also lack of expectations. I hear that a lot from people in clinic too, and saying, thank you, Dr. Lusico, for explaining this to me. It was really anxiety provoking because I didn't know what to expect, right? Is this something that's going to go away and never come back? Or is this something that can be up and down over time? So it's really important to spend time with people. And I'm not just talking about in a clinical setting, but I think one great thing about the Alopecia the AJL Pen Pal program is that people can share their personal stories, right? So not only do people not feel like they're alone, but they can see that, everybody's got a little bit different experience, right? Maybe somebody might have more mild disease and somebody else might have more severe or unpredictable disease too, and that it's really a spectrum. Julie, you mentioned a little bit about things in school. If you feel comfortable, can you just talk a little bit, or Allison as well too, and sharing some experiences about what might have been a little bit difficult navigating as a child? Because like we said, one of the biggest obstacles is lack of knowledge. And of course, a lot of younger children might not be aware of alopecia areata or how to actually navigate that without potentially singling somebody out or making them feel alone or bullied in school.
Yeah, sure. So this happened when Allison was in second grade during recess, and there was this boy, and I don't think he had any bad intention. And this was one of those days that Allison was wearing her wig, and he pulled the wig off while chasing her. And Allison at that moment, she was devastated. She started crying and went immediately to the nurse's office. And that incident made me realize that we need to really educate the classmates in that this is not okay. So thought really hard about how to actually how to react with the situation. Of course, I was angry, I was upset, I was very sad, a lot of different emotions. And what we did was that I wanted to make sure that people understood, there are different reasons why people wear a wig, and that a wig is just, again, it's a accessory, and it's so we introduced this concept of a wig party during one of the morning sessions, and it was around Halloween time. So I was able to just walk into a Halloween store and buy lots of different wigs. And I wanted people to understand that, people have different conditions, different choices, and that wigs, they can also experiment with wigs, and that, wig is not a bad thing, and wig is not an unfamiliar thing. So I had everyone try a different type of wigs, and which I thought was really helpful with the rest of her second grade. And that isolated incidents made me realize, goodness, we really need to do a big push on just the overall awareness.
I love that. I never knew that story, Julie.
Yeah.
Too. I love that too. That would be great. That could be our next project to introduce that
Yeah.
as part of our
Yeah.
education for elementary and middle school children. And while I know that, these are difficult things to talk about too, we feel like it's important for us to share our own stories and journeys too. Allison and then Lindsay, having lived with alopecia areata, can you share your own stories about, things that you may have struggled with too in terms of school or bullying, and how you help to navigate that?
I can go first. So yeah, I was a big hat wearer as a kid. Like, hats were my thing. I had a whole baller collection of hats. And something that would happen that was really not my favorite was, people taking off hats, like people just stealing people's hats. And it's like, not to flirt with them, it's mean and it's wrong. And, there was one particular instance where we had like a gravel, like playground kind of area. And I remember once, like, these really just rude kids like took it off and were like kicking it around in the dirt. And then of course, like, I'm freaking out. So I put it back on my head, and like, not ideal to put a dirty hat on your head, not ideal. But I was like, oh, no one's going to see this though. And so it's just some really terrible things. Like, it's, I tell people all the time, like, either new people, like, I was super shy as a kid, which no one believes now because I don't stop talking. And like, a lot of you guys are nice enough to, do my support group and things like that. It took a really long time for me to be comfortable in myself. And it really, I'm very lucky. I do have a little bit of hair up in here. And so it's such a tough thing, but it's really the really big game changer for me is I always had a really good group of friends. And while I didn't really have friends specifically with alopecia, I know that would have like changed the game for me. So that's why I'm so thankful for like the Pen Pal program and so much what Allison really spearheads on social media. I think about, being in high school, I had Facebook, didn't have Instagram, and it's, Instagram, you open so much. And I think about, the post Allison makes for the Alopecia Justice League account, but I also think about there's just so much more access to, yes, crappy beauty standards, but also like more inclusivity. So it's, there's certain people I tell, in my either my general support group meetings or one-on-ones that I have with people is change your feed up, like follow people that you think are beautiful, but also have alopecia. Like they're out there, we're out here, we're all beautiful and like doing our thing. And so it's really just, everyone is so like the best gift alopecia has given me truly is I really spent my childhood hiding and just shy and like so worried, like something really bad was going to happen or I was going to be bullied. But when I actually, I used to do hats, and then in high school, I kind of did like, I had a little bald spot I did with like clips. Like I did like what I love to joke about is like my sexy comb over. Going to my senior year, like I was very close with my group of friends. I felt very comfortable. And I was like, I'm just not going to cover up. I'm going to let this happen. And no one said anything. And then I went to college and no one said anything. And I live in New York City, which I always say New York City is like the best place to be different in the world. Cause like I'm walking down the street and then there's like a poodle that's like blonde, like, or a pink poodle, like walking down the street. So like, I'm just not going to be the most interesting thing. That's very silly. But all that said, like I was subjected to a lot of bullying as a kid, but I feel like when I turned 17, I decided to stop. Like I always say to my attendees, like alopecia can feel a lot like driving. Like you're driving, you're living your life, but you're checking your rear view, you're checking your speed, you're checking your like this and that. And it can feel like alopecia is like always in your mind in that way when you're like, you're going through your life, but like, do I have a new patch? Did my wig slip? Is this treatment working? Like, it's just kind of like driving where you're like, I always have to keep my eyes on the road. And you're like, alopecia doesn't have to be the road. Like you have a whole life to live. And so I just really, ever since I sort of decided to lead with who I am, I have had the gift of people meeting me back with who they are. And the biggest gift alopecia has given me is every single person has something about themselves that makes them different, that they're worried about. And so it's really meeting people where they are. And again, like as anyone watching this call knows, like alopecia is so personal. And so to sort of marry that, what's personal to policy is such an honor. So yeah, Allison, do you want to add anything about your experiences?
Of course, that was amazing, Lindsay. Thank you for sharing. I think for me, having alopecia from such a young age, in addition to obviously the greater offenses, what was really difficult for me were the little things. For example, thinking about, if I participate in that gym activity, is my hat going to fall off or slip? And also, as a young girl, hair is so important at that young age. Girls are constantly tying their hair in pigtails or getting their hair ready for a big dance. And so having to miss out on those key events, if you will, was really hard for me. I'm currently in high school and I think I still experience that, unintentional microaggressions where people are talking about their hair and saying remarks like, I can't imagine being bald, or that person looks bald, and saying it in a with a negative connotation. And so I think for me, things that may not come to mind as being the hardest thing about alopecia, the little things, is actually what I've struggled with the most. And, I'm continuing to learn how to embrace my condition. I think that's one of the biggest realizations that I've had, is that embracing alopecia looks different for everyone. And so one thing that I've learned for me, what's helped me to embrace my condition, is finding ways to find joy in my condition. And for me, that's trying new things. So I love to try new hats, bandanas, wigs, and again, going back to the power of choice, being able to choose what to have or what to wear on my head.
And I think that brings us to our next question, I think, too. So if Dominique, you can put up our next poll question, and then help to launch us to the second part of our webinar. So our second question is, do you worry about your alopecia or your loved one's alopecia? And remember, worry could be about many things, right? Worried about if you can get the wig covered, worried about if somebody will be bullied, worried about if you'll have a recurrence of your hair loss or a new patch that shows up, worried that you want treatment, but it's not covered by your insurance. This can look like many things. So we'll give you 20 or 30 seconds, and then Dominique will post the answers, and then that will help to launch our second part.
Would you like me to end it?
Yes, please.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, so the overwhelming, and this isn't surprising to me, the overwhelming majority of people said yes, they worry, because remember, worry looks like a lot of different things to us, you know, whether that, and I worry as a clinician who's responsible for caring for people. I really take a lot of, I take that role very seriously, that people entrust me to care for them and provide them the best of care and use shared decision making, and really review things that are options and not pushing somebody into treating or not treating. I think that, like Lindsay had said too, you know, bald is beautiful. Alopecia can certainly be your superpower, like she's talked about in her podcast, very nearly almost. And that different doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. And I think the more that I have actually gained as a person through treating people with alopecia is that our differences are really what bring us together. Everybody on this webinar and in this room today has struggled with at least something in their life that has felt that that's made them different, or they weren't able to fully express who they are in whatever capacity that is. Everybody has experienced that. And I think if we try to, as we try to educate our community, take that actually in mind and help to expand upon that, we can help to empower the alopecia community and the world at large as well. And so this really brings us to our next segment of how we can help to bring the community together. And I want to start out by education. And I think, you know, talking about AJL and very nearly almost, as well as support group meetings in terms of educating the community. Julie, this question is for you. So I'm sure that it was very overwhelming and a daunting task to decide to first come to the alopecia support group meeting, which of course you said is where you met Lindsay and myself. So what made you decide to finally take that leap to come to a support group meeting, and how has it helped empower you in terms of knowledge?
Yes. So as a mother, and at that time, only Allison had alopecia. And I felt, and we saw so many doctors, and I felt very alone and helpless, not being able to find that permanent treatment for Allison. And I learned about NAF actually through, the dermatologist at that time. And the way he actually recommended it's going to be great for you, mom, as well. Because as a mother, I felt just, like I wasn't doing enough for my kids. So it was actually to connect with other parents. And I wanted to understand how, they were being a support to people, who were going through alopecia. And I actually debated whether I should bring Allison to that first meeting or not, because I wasn't sure whether Allison was ready for that. And I'm so glad I did. Because there we met just people from different walks of their lives, and met different moms, and again, it just opened my eyes to, gosh, I can do this, I can get through this, and I can really be that strong person in Allison's mom. So it also, I had another change in kind of my perspective, which was there are things that we can control, and there are things that we cannot control. When Allison's hair grows back, and it is something that I cannot control, but I decided that everything that we can, we will do our best to really raise our kid as a happy, confident person. So at that point, then we said, okay, we're just going to focus on one treatment, because we were going to see multiple doctors, herbal, different medicine, and I think that there isn't a treatment that we didn't try out. So rather than try to find that permanent cure, I said, okay, we're gonna just have Allison focus on soccer rather than spending all this time at different doctor's offices. And then I said, okay, what else can we do? And that community aspect was also, I kind of looked at it as, yes, I want to help people who are going through this experience in my close family circle. But at the same time, I wanted to get to know other parents. So, this is, again, my outreach to parents who are on this webinar. If you'd like to, talk to me, and again, I wish I had some more moms to talk to. Yeah, that was really amazing.
Maybe we should make an AJL mom and dad
Parents group, yes.
parent
Yeah,
mentor program.
that's a
our
great
next
idea.
So I wanted to give everyone justice because we've got lots of great questions that are coming through. And so first one is for Allison and then Lindsay. Lots of great compliments on AJL and Very Nearly Almost. And people want to know how can they access the podcast and the Instagram profile to potentially get involved or listen.
So Very Nearly Almost is quick and easy. That is Very Nearly Almost on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. I love being all cool and saying wherever you get your podcasts. But yeah, so that's very quick and easy. We also have an Instagram at Very Nearly Almost. I will be releasing a conference specific episode, probably like 2 weeks after the NAF conference, but I will be there and I'm really excited to record some stuff while I'm there. So that's that on VNA. But Allison, take it away for AJL.
And then for AJL, our Instagram is at Alopecia Justice League, and we post daily content on there, so I highly encourage you to follow. And for more information, I also encourage you to visit our website, which is alopeciajusticeleague.com, where you can stay tuned for even more news updates on alopecia.
So I love this next question because it's going to introduce about how AJL got its start was legislative advocacy for the WIG bill. And so the question was, can you share the progress made on policy level and what you've been able to achieve momentum in the right direction in DC and beyond? Allison, can you take that one away?
Yes, I would love to. So last year, 2022, was the main year where we began our advocacy efforts. And in that year, we were able to achieve significant progress. For example, we met with many of our representatives, including Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and we were able to secure her sponsorship for the Senate companion bill. And I believe that Gary is going to be touching more on this, but essentially, last year, there were two bills, one in the House and one in the Senate. And the reason for there being two bills was that in the Senate companion bill, rather than beginning in the House and then being passed to the Senate to then be passed and signed by the president, the Senate companion bill would begin, the bill would start in the Senate and thus only required to be voted out of the Senate. And so we were able to secure our senator's sponsorship for that bill. And we were also able to work with many constituents across the US in securing their representatives' sponsorship for both the state and, or for both the Senate and House bills.
Yes. And just for everyone, this bill that we're going to talk about in more detail now, if passed, would actually require Medicare to cover a wig as a cranial prosthesis as actually part of someone's medical treatment plan. So the best way to, when I write letters of medical necessity, which if this bill were passed, a clinician like myself would be required to write a letter, I really liken it to breast prosthesis. So for breast cancer survivors, for example, nobody would question whether or not that should be covered by insurance for someone to have a breast prosthesis for a cancer survivor. And it's really the parallel to say, someone wasn't given the choice of having an autoimmune condition that has taken for many people their sense of self away. And so that's really how we came up with the idea of a montage to advocate wigs should be a choice because alopecia isn't. And so we're really trying to continue to come up with creative ways to advocate. So my question is for Julie, and then we'll bring Gary on to talk about in more detail. But Julie, do you have to be a member of AJL or NAF in order to make change and advocate in your community? And if you wanted to get involved in NAF, what are good ways that people can do that?
We absolutely encourage everyone to join NAF and AJL, but it's not a requirement. And there is there are different ways that you can reach out to your representative, and we have a very simple instruction laid out on AJL, alopeciajusticeleague.com.
Yes, and another thing we wanted to talk about is the importance of storytelling in advocacy. And I think a common misconception many people have is the importance of statistics over storytelling, because there are so many statistics about alopecia out there. For example, the number of people who have alopecia in the US, or various quality of life statistics. But what representatives really want to hear is your story, because your story is what makes you unique and what will appeal to their emotions. And so what I really recommend to individuals who are asking, how do I incorporate my story into my advocacy? What I do and I recommend to others is to make a list of what having alopecia means to you, wearing wigs, treatment, and upon that list, extract 1 or 2 anecdotes or experiences that which you can incorporate into the emails and calls and meetings with your representatives. And I think that's a really great place to start, with incorporating your story into your advocacy.
I think another question that I got that I'd like to take was, are there reps for people of color with alopecia? And the answer is absolutely. Ayanna Pressley, who's in Massachusetts, is the first one that comes to our mind. Not only is she in that montage, she's been a collaborator for AJL. She's a huge supporter of the National Alopecia Areata Foundation. And so the answer is yes. Ayanna Pressley does have an official Instagram page and a website too. So I encourage you to go on to Google Ayanna Pressley's press page, as well as going to her Instagram account too. She's a wonderful advocate. She has alopecia areata herself. She's very open about her story and how she's turned that into her own superpower as someone who's promoted legislative change on a very real level.
And that's a great person to mention too, Kristen, because she's actually a co-author of the bill, or I believe as it was last year. But album just dropped, 2 updated bills, literally just dropped, you guys. So we're really excited to dig into that with you a little bit.
Before we bring Gary on, Allison, I wanted to ask if you could, I'd like to introduce this video that both Allison and Lindsay are a part of. And this was a grant supported by Pfizer that was I had applied for with Dr. Jerry Shapiro as the alopecia areata experts at NYU. And it's a 10-part continuing medical education series that will be launched this summer. And the video that you're going to see is the introduction video to alopecia areata. And this is an all video 10-part series that is completely free, and it's geared toward medical providers as well as the public. And so stay tuned and go to the NYU Langone Health Dermatology CME, or Continuing Medical Education page this summer, so that you can view the entire 10-part series for yourself. You ready, Allison?
Yes. Can you see my screen? I'm gonna
Yes.
get it to full screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Allison, can you make sure to share the audio on this?
Yes, it should.
Beauty comes in many forms.
There she is.
Is it good, or should I
Yes, I can hear it now.
Play
Okay.
away.
So this is my baby. It was one of the first scars that I got when I started losing my hair a lot and I couldn't hide it anymore.
We are all the sum of our experiences, and everyone's experiences are different.
So I was diagnosed with alopecia when I was 5 years old.
I had to fall in love with myself.
In this series, we're talking about alopecia areata.
It isn't just hair, it's the whole persona of the person.
We are one puzzle piece to help someone gain their identity back.
We are taking a deep dive into the nuances of this complex autoimmune disease. We know that when we are armed with knowledge, we can be better physicians, colleagues, friends, family, and individuals.
Thank you, Allison, for sharing that. This series really was a labor of love. It's taken us over a year to complete, and we're really, really excited to share it with the entire community, not just dermatologists, primary care physicians, but the public as well, really to help increase awareness of how to recognize alopecia areata, when is it right to see your dermatologist, what a workup would be potentially with your dermatologist, as well as helping to advocate for support, not just through wigs or any other treatment for that matter, but also the psychosocial components that are quite complex in the setting of alopecia areata as well. So this is a great representation of how we've turned knowledge into power, and we really encourage everyone to check out that series. So again, it's just go onto Google, the NYU Langone Dermatology CME series, and it will be launched this summer. So we'd like to bring it back to Gary, that he can help to talk in more detail about our wig legislative bill. Gary.
Thanks, Kristen. One of the privileges of being with NAF is I get to meet a lot of extraordinary people in the alopecia areata community, and just knowing you four individually, you guys are all impressive. Put you together, and it's absolute magic. And what a fortuitous day, did I pronounce that right? Fortuitous day, to be having this webinar, because as you've mentioned, we had new legislation drop. Whenever a new Congress is seated, they can't continue with the previous legislation. So when you guys got to meet with Senator Gillibrand in 2022, you were able to get her to co-sponsor, which is great. But unfortunately, that was with the 117th Congress. We just had the 118th Congress. So that legislation has to be reintroduced, and it just was today, both in the House and Senate. We have House Bill number HR 4034 and Senate Bill 1922. Both of those ask for the same thing. They ask that wigs or cranial prosthetics be redesignated as durable medical equipment. That's important because durable medical equipment is covered by Medicare. And when Medicare covers the cost of a wig, we do believe that you will then see private insurers cover that as well. So what we want to do now is get what are called co-sponsors for this legislation. A co-sponsor is another congressperson or senator pledging that they will in fact vote for that bill when it comes to a vote. Lots of legislation is introduced to Congress every year. They can't vote on all of it. They can really only vote on that legislation that gets the most interest from voters, and they can gauge that by how many co-sponsors each bill gets. And so we really want everyone within the NAF community to be an advocate and reach out to their congressional representatives and senators. Now, what Lindsay, Julie, and Kristen are legislative liaisons. Allison is a legislative mentor. What legislative liaisons and legislative mentors do is that they not only have these meetings and reach out to their congresspeople, they form relationships with those offices. Advocacy is a relationships game, and your lawmakers can only support so much legislation because lots of it comes across their desk. So they tend to only support those bills in which they have some expertise on. And so that's why we form these relationships. That's why legislative liaisons are encouraged to have meetings in their home districts with their offices of both the representatives and their senators. And then when it's Alopecia Areata Awareness Month in September, we then have a Hill Day where we bring some 30 advocates to Capitol Hill, and we then meet with those offices right there in DC. So we're making the asks both at home and in DC. I'm so excited about this September because we are going to have a number of the AJL with us there. But on top of that, it'll be our first full-scale Hill Day since pre-COVID. It'll be our first one in 4 years. So we're really looking forward to that. We had really wanted to go back and do it last year, especially when we had the conference in DC. Security measures post-January 6th, post-COVID, kept us from doing that, but they finally reopened the Hill. Things are back to the way they were. So we're really excited about this coming Hill Day. And so for those of you watching this webinar, really, I hope you're inspired by these four incredible women here. I really hope you're taking what they're saying to heart about fellowship and advocacy, why it's so important. I know that we're posting links. Please go to the NAF website to learn more. And if you wish to learn more about becoming a legislative liaison, forming those relationships that are so important, please reach out to me. My email is gary@naf.org. I'll be more than happy to chat with you, tell you more about how these programs work. If you're someone like Allison, who I still can't believe is under voting age, she's more mature than I'll ever be. But if you're between the ages of 12 and 17, and you're interested in the legislative process, again, reach out to me to become a legislative mentor. We'd love to have you.
And like Gary said, Alopecia Justice League will be panelists at the NAP conference this year. It's such a bummer that I cannot be there, but I really hope that I will be there next year. And we really would love for all of you to join us there, so that if you don't already realize it, that your alopecia truly is your superpower. Lisa?
Here I am. Thank you, guys. As Gary said, you're all very inspiring. Gary, you are inspiring as well, and apologies for not introducing Gary as NAF's Communication Director and Advocacy Lead at the top of this webinar. But I think that this has been a very inspiring conversation for everybody online to hear. We have a couple of minutes if you have a question that you have not yet already posted. So please go ahead and put that in the Q&A if you have something at this time. You shared lots of social media handles and website link URLs. We will plan to send that out to all the registrants. I'll collect that information from the panel and share that out. So if you missed it during the conversation, don't worry, we will get that to you. You didn't have a chance, maybe I'll give you a minute or so just to talk about what's happening at the state level in terms of legislative advocacy. Are there things happening in individual states? And if so, how does that help efforts at the federal level?
Yes. So Allison and I actually testified earlier I have no sense of time, for Senator Jill Carter of Baltimore's office virtually. And that was such an exciting day. We basically, it was giving Scandal, it was giving West Wing. We did a little Zoom, and we basically, as Allison so artfully said earlier, it's about storytelling. Yes, numbers don't lie, and that's very helpful. But like I said, I think so many Americans think of policy as this really far away thing that's not up to them, and it is up to us, and it is up to people to implement change. And so testifying on behalf of this bill, it's actually called the Jada Pinkett Smith bill because she is from Baltimore, Maryland, you guys. And so I believe this bill also, it's about wig coverage by both Medicare and private insurance. So I'm waiting for a status update about what's happening at the state level. Obviously, the legislative liaisons really hone in on that federal level because that's where things, again, but those things cause a domino effect. And so it's really, like I said, policy and advocacy can feel so far away. I know advocacy is a really hot buzzword right now because of everything going on, everything everywhere all at once. But you can make a difference. You can follow AJL. You can, reach out to NAF and be like, legislative liaison, what is that? I want to do that. That sounds amazing. Or I'm shy. Can I send a baller email and join that way? So it's so easy to think those things are so far away and decided on people that don't know what's going on. We know what's going on and we get to make choices. So there is an avenue for you to be an advocate, whatever, we'll find a place for you.
Allison, can you remind everyone, just in case somebody's feeling a little bit overwhelmed or past their bandwidth and they can't join as a legislative liaison or mentor, how can they find scripts and ways to advocate through their local community at the state level or at the federal level to send emails to advocate?
Of course. So I think the first thing that begins with is awareness. And if you visit Alopecia Justice League's website, alopeciajusticeleague.com, you will find many resources in terms of the new wig bill and also the history of alopecia legislation.
I'll just quickly add too, Lisa, the state bills are in Maryland, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire.
Cool.
And another thing to note on the state bills is that it's been an incredible experience working with various legislative mentors and liaisons who are spearheading the efforts to pass legislation at the state level.
Awesome.
I want to add to that as well too, because I'm very lucky to be in academic medicine because much of my work is also focused on research. And research doesn't have to be a clinical trial, for example, or introducing a new medication, even though I am involved in that as well. But for example, some of the research that we have ongoing is equal access to care. So we're trying to quantify if there are any discrepancies in access to, for example, JAK inhibitor medicine, which is the gold standard medicine when given orally to treat moderate to severe alopecia areata, right? Are there certain groups of people in the United States or certain areas within New York, if these are people that are local to us in New York City, that don't have as good access to care? And if so, why? What are the things that are leading to that? I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I still have many patients, even though baricitinib is the first drug ever and currently the only drug that is FDA approved to treat moderate to severe alopecia areata. There are more in the pipeline, but despite FDA approval, I'm still getting denials by Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial insurances. And sometimes there are weeks to even potentially months of delay of administrative back and forth before getting a medication approved for someone to take. And even after that, there's still a possibility that the medication is still not covered. And if it is, the copay of what the patient or their family is responsible for out of pocket can be astronomical. And so there's really leaps and bounds. And I think this will be a thing that we'll really focus on next, and some of the research that we're currently doing at NYU and in collaboration with the AJL and with Lisa Yu and everyone at NAF as well. And so shameless plug for research, but please expect an email from NAF, and that this really is to gauge real people's experience with access to medication, how alopecia might impact them personally. And so really the point of this survey study is to quantify what's going on in real world practice right now for us as people who are either treating and or have alopecia areata or have a family member with alopecia areata, and how we can actually turn that into a paper, an article that is published in a peer-reviewed journal for other doctors and other clinicians and people to access. And most importantly, like we've done with Ayanna Presley's office, shared some of the research that we've done for WIGS specifically, and use peer-reviewed literature that we've published and use that to navigate and promote legislative change as well. Because like we said, knowledge really truly is power. I know it's corny, but it really is true. And we're helping to promote knowledge through multiple areas with Gary and the legislative liaisons and mentors, through continuing medical education series, through the NAF support group as well, and of course through the AJL as well. Allison, Lindsay, and Julie, any closing remarks?
I should have noted, if people were asking about VNA, if you guys really enjoyed listening to Kristen, Julie, and Allison as much as I always do, they each have an episode on Very Nearly Almost. So if you want to like binge us like Netflix, like you can go do that after this if you want to. So yeah, Kristen was my first interview episode. She really dives into like different treatments, the medical bits of alopecia that might seem so, again, things can seem so out of reach. They're not. Julie talks greatly about being a parent with alopecia, and I just love listening to Allison Lee. She gives me hope in the next generation, honestly.
I was just scrolling through the questions here, and I see I got a shout out here from Gwendolyn Cook. Gwen and I did a radio interview a couple of weeks back, which went really well. That was a lot of fun. So Gwen, thanks for having me on. And if anyone else wants me to do local media with them, just please let me know and we'll arrange for that.
I think we need to wrap it up here, but I'll just share one comment that came in. It says, "You've all been wonderful and are a terrific asset to NAF, and the Alopecia Justice League is the ticket. As a group, you're very special. We're lucky to have you as advocates. And this person, who happens to be from NAF's board, is looking forward to seeing you at conference." Sorry, Dr. Lasico, but next year we'll catch you there. I want to say thank you, all of you, for doing this and sharing your passion. Really, I think you've inspired a lot of people today, and look forward to having folks in the audience join you on this journey, and really spreading awareness and all the issues of advocacy that we're all trying to improve. So thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up the webinar and share my screen again and take the group through a few more slides, but thank you. Thank you all. I applaud you all. Thank you so much. And we will share all of your links and podcast information and social media links tomorrow at the as soon as we can.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And thanks to the audience for being here. Hopefully you are inspired and want to participate more. Here's where you can find more from NAF, naf.org, be an advocate, or contact Gary by email at gary@naf.org. And one more plug to come and see the Alopecia Justice Gang in person at the NAF conference. Allison, Lindsay, and Julie will be there participating in a panel discussion. Please join us in Denver, Colorado for Reaching New Summits Together. This will be the 38th annual NAF, the National Alopecia Areata Conference. We have a great lineup, including, in addition to Alopecia Justice League, Grammy Award-winning winner Molly Tuttle, Dr. Brett King, Dr. Britt Preglow. Check out the conference website and register. As we mentioned earlier, there will be a webinar survey link that will pop up in your browser at the end of the webinar. Please share your feedback on this webinar and share your ideas for future ones, and we will listen to all your ideas and help us make those future plans. Our next webinar is going to be Alopecia Areata 101 on Wednesday, July 19th, and it's going to be presented by Dr. Amy McMichael, who's a professor of dermatology at Wake Forest School of Medicine. Dr. McMichael is going to talk about commonly asked questions like, what's the difference between alopecia areata and other types of hair loss? This webinar will provide an overview of alopecia areata and will untangle some of the terms that we use to describe it, and some of the myths and facts about alopecia areata will also be covered. So registration for this webinar is now open at naf.org/webinars. And don't forget that NAF offers a number of resources and programs for the alopecia areata community, including support groups. You heard a lot about that today, and Lindsay is one of our very esteemed support group leaders. We also have our youth mentor program and also the legislative mentor and liaison programs that you also heard about today. We also, of course, share news and information through webinars and other sources, and also learn how you can get involved with us. So please visit naf.org or email us at support@naf.org for more information. And that concludes today's webinar program. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, panel, for being here and joining us. And we look forward to seeing everybody on the next webinar. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.